Hi everyone, are you there? If you can see us, please say hi. I'm trying this out for the first time. I'm not sure how this works. We have started the broadcast. Not sure if you can see us though. Checking with someone.
It is, I think, live on YouTube.
It is?
I just opened the link. Yeah.
Yes, people are saying hi. Okay, great. Great. I welcome Aditya to speak with us at Shores Beyond UPSC. Thank you, Jeel. Thank you, Shahul. Nice to have you all here today. And Aditya has had a very interesting and very inspirational journey post UPSC. A lot of our aspirants have been waiting to hear from him for a very long time. I'm glad that today we have the opportunity of hearing about Aditya's transition journey. I only knew about his impact consulting career at Samagra, but he told me that he first transitioned to finance and then to impact consulting. So, Aditya, would you like to take us through your journey, starting from the time you started preparing for the exam, and how did you decide it was time to move on?
Okay. Thanks, Argam, and welcome all. Yeah, it is very good to know that I have had an inspiring journey. I hope people can sort of take from my experience and move into productive and better careers faster than I did. Uh, I had a very long stint at preparing for the UPSC. This was over 10 years ago. And I was sort of in my undergrad, I was doing engineering. And during third year, I figured that, I wanted to get into civil services. Mostly, I had figured that why I want to get into civil services would be sort of threefold. So I always sort of define a lot of things through Venn diagrams. So I figured that basis my interests, which were to work on a lot of things, so be a generalist uh, as a skill set, then to work in a position where I would be able to create impact at scale, uh, and also uh, be able to sort of contribute to the nation's sort of development and sort of nation building. So three Venn diagrams, three circles in my Venn diagram basically that I wanted to tick off. All of them met very squarely at a sort of an IS officer's job. So as an IS officer, you can contribute definitely to a nation building. You can work to create impact at scale, and also it is a very gentlest job. Right, you have to do everything and anything under the sun, and so all of these things sort of motivated me to take up the job basically. So I started preparing while I was in third year. I took up geography as an optional at the time, and I remember sort of 4th June, my fourth year final exams had I think gotten over, and 12th or 13th June was the pre, and so basically the hardly a week's gap, and I gave that pre exam, cleared it, and so for the uske baad se there it has been a it was a 3-4 year journey of UPSC prep. From the first attempt onwards, the good and bad part about my journey was that I was able to clear the mains exam consistently. The good part was it sort of never stopped me from preparing, and so there was no as such halt in preparation, and I didn't sort of question myself कि अरे गलत ही घुस गए हैं. So I was able to reach at least till the interview stage. But the bad part, of course, was that I could not clear the interview stage, and so my final marks were always 7, 11, 13, sort of short of the merit list.
You still remember
And
it?
yeah, yeah, of course, you always remember. uh, and so at the time, at least, when I gave my first two attempts, I'd given those attempts really thinking I'll sort of top the exam, I'll be in top 10 and so forth. So a lot of aspiration and sort of drive to be a ranker in the first and second attempts. But at the time, I think I also was losing confidence quite a bit when I was not sort of clearing the exam. So after my second attempt, I actually I took a break. So I took a break and did not appear for the exam, and that's when I took up an internship because I figured that the the general anxiety that was building in was not helping me prepare as much as I would like. And so I figured that the time I was spending in preparing for the exam was not as productive, and it might make sense for me to do something else to build back my confidence and then get back into the study mode. And so I took up an internship, it was a sort of very difficult thing to find an internship. So I basically pinged all my undergrad friends to figure out what they were doing, and one of them was actually working in finance. And this one friend then got me in touch with his firm, and there was sort of a couple of rounds of stuff. People asked me why your CV is so empty. I had nothing on my CV except for showing achievements I had done in school, and so they weren't generally very supportive of my CV as such. But thankfully, and fortunately, they took sort of got me into that internship. And
Um,
so that internship was very, very interesting. Sorry?
can I stop you here for a moment to elaborate on how others who are currently going through the same problems of CV being very light, how can they deal with that? You have any tips for that now in retrospect?
Yeah. Yes. What people should definitely do is look up some CV refining YouTube videos. Get your hands on onto some CVs at least, of people who are relevant to your industry. So consulting CV will look very different from a finance CV. Will look very different from sort of development sector fellowship CV and so forth. And so a lot depends on who is. We have to look at who is looking at the CV, right? And so if you visualize that the other person across the table is actually somebody from investment banking, and then so you have to figure out what would they want to see in your CV, right? So what kind of skill sets, what kind of achievements, what kind of elaborate points in your prior experience and so forth. And so getting yourself into the shoes of that person really helps. And if you're applying for multiple jobs, I would highly recommend making multiple CVs, uh, different sets of CVs, because of course everybody is a lot of things. But the problem is that when you apply for a job, people are not looking for all your qualities. People are looking for relevant qualities. And so making sort of different versions of your CVs for different kind of roles, I think will help. At the time, I had no such idea whatsoever. And I was sort of grateful to my friend who had put me in touch. Otherwise, I don't think I would have gotten my CV shortlisted anyway. But after I got in touch. Sort of, I had a few interviews. I had an Excel exercise to do and some other things, which I thankfully cleared. And so once I got into the whole thing, then I realized a lot of actually things that they was looking for in my CV. Some skill sets on the finance side, some skill sets on the softer skill side, some skill sets on sort of the hard skills, presentation, Excel, advanced Excel, and so forth. They were looking at certifications. If I did not have relevant work ex, was I keen enough to be in the field? And that keenness, at least, uh, could have been highlighted through Coursera courses, through other internships, through uh, general interest areas during school, college, all of those things. So tailoring your CV, I think, to the relevant market was relevant specific company, in fact, was important. Anyway, so I did that, and it was a finance sort of role. uh, I really enjoyed it. I was very, very glad that I had gotten out of the UPSC prep mode for a while, and I was productively engaged. It was a paid internship, so that was also helpful. And I was building a skill set which made me employable. That made me very happy, because all the knowledge that you get from the UPSC, at least the knowledge part, it doesn't make you employable unless you want to become a teacher, or a sort of a coaching tutor, right? Uh, so yeah, so I was actually very happy to get hard skills in that role, and also people were great. So it was a very, very good experience, to be honest, to be in that role. After I got a little comfortable, what I did was, and here I think again, when I look in hindsight, I think I made a good choice. I thought that when I'm doing one role, I will really give everything to that role. What I did not do was to do the role half-heartedly and also keep prepping, because that would have meant that I was not doing anything sort of with excellence as a value, right? So when I got into that role, it was obviously a very steep learning curve for me. I didn't know F of finance, didn't know a lot of Excel also, and so I had to learn a lot of things on the skill side, on the domain side, on the organization side, and it occupied a lot of the time, especially on weekdays. And so basically, I figured that I will not be spending any more time prepping when I'm sort of doing this job. And so I did that for a year, uh, and then, to be honest, uh, got got pretty comfortable and pretty good at sort of the role and the job. Started growing within the firm, and once I started growing within the firm, then I sort of figured that okay, now I'm comfortable. Now I have a stable income stream. I have a skill set that I can bank on. Let me get back to UPSC again. So that's when sort of I took a sabbatical from the job and sat again for UPSC. Again, thankfully cleared sort of all sorts of the written exams.
For how
Give
long do you have the job?
uh, I took my sabbatical about 1 year into the job.
Okay.
Uh,
And then you
yeah,
cleared again. Yes, and then
yeah,
going back. Sorry.
correct. So uh, June, July, I think I joined, and then uh, next next July, I think next pre actually I gave with the job, and then once I cleared the pre, I took a sabbatical and then gave mains again. That's how I planned it. So once I took a sabbatical, then of course fully went into prep again uh, for 3 4 months, and was able to clear the exam. This time I was very sure I'll make it, like every aspirant, and did not, like most aspirants. So uh, once that happened, I think then it was a then something switched off in my brain around the prep. Uh, I wasn't very sure if I was utilizing my time well enough. I wasn't very sure what exactly was missing. But every sort of in every attempt, one or the other subject sort of used to get goofed up. Sometimes it was sort of one paper in optional. Sometimes it was sort of GS paper 3. Sometimes it was GS paper 4. Sometimes it was the essay. There was no pattern to what I was bad at, and so I couldn't really figure. Of course, they were I could diagnose what I was bad at and so forth, but every time it was something different, and I was just getting into that cycle of not being able to get through, with something always remaining sort of short. And so basically uske baad, my keenness to really sit for the exam without doing anything actually decreased a lot after the third interview. uh, I actually also gave a fourth attempt. To be honest, I was sort of fully uh, into my job. I was actually growing very well. I was recruiting my own team, had a few people in my team, and so all of those things were happening on the job side. Uh, but I think I hadn't had a full closure on the exam. But my keenness also was not still 100%. So I ended up giving another attempt. Shockingly, I was still able to clear the pre. I had no idea how. And then once I cleared the pre, then I again sat for the mains. This time with very very little prep or interest, and so not so shockingly, I did not clear it, and that was sort of the end of it. So I put a very very difficult decision to put an end to the prep, and to just move on with life. In hindsight, very good decision, I feel, uh, on both fronts. Very good decision, I think, on giving those attempts with full uh, sort of focus and zero distractions in the beginning. And also, I think a good decision in hindsight to sort of shift away from prep and move into something else. Uh, because in both cases, I feel what I did well was to really do one thing at a time, uh, which I think worked. Doing both things at the same time wouldn't have worked, which I'm actually glad about now. I'll stop here. So this was just UPSC prep, few years of my sort of finance job, uh, and would love to sort of hear from you also, and get some questions so that I can steer the conversation in that direction. because उसके बाद भी there's a 7-8 year journey.
Yes, please. If we have any questions, any comments for Aditya, for Shores Beyond UPSC, for me, or any question you have for yourself, you can park it here in the comments. If you type, we can see your comments. Okay, I don't think we have any questions from people right now. All right, let's hear more about your journey. Then, from finance, how did you move to impact consulting? You've been in finance for 3 years now. You're enjoying it. You're having a great time. You're
Yeah,
doing well as well. What prompted you to move away from finance?
yeah. So I actually spent 4 years in finance, and so uh, somewhere around the 3.5 year mark, I feel once I had gotten comfortable, the money was actually quite good. The people I was working with very good. The kind of role that I had was also I learned a lot, and there was adequate responsibility. So it basically checked a lot of the boxes that anybody needs in a job. Uh, but one thing that I couldn't sort of wrap my head around was what was the impact of my role. And so the impact of my role mostly was to make money for people who already had a lot of money. We were sort of investing in the US stock markets, and we were a advisory firm for large investment banks. So Bernstein, Goldman Sachs sort of were our clients. So if we were giving advice on different sort of equities, then it was obviously making a lot of money for people. But I figured it was a very replaceable role, right? So somebody else can do this, uh, and so there was no direct impact on anybody's life that I was making, except for maybe the top 1% who anyway will make that money. And so this got me again back into the whole idea of why I really wanted to get into any professional job. So this got me thinking about why I wanted to get into UPSC and so forth. And so again, I figured that I have to get back to those three circles in the Venn diagram that I started with, and this can't be the only thing that I end up doing as a career. So the idea of doing something for nation building, something as a generalist, and something where I'm able to create something and do something in impact, sort of sparked the thing. And the fourth circle, at least that I had gotten added, was to have a decent living. So I and decent living did not mean maximizing on compensation, but at least it was to say that ठीक है कुछ compensation हो तो वो चलेगा. And so basically उसके बाद I started looking out for all sorts of social impact organizations that were existing at the time, uh, and uh, I had sort of made a sort of like a now when I see it, it's like a very consulting sort of approach of doing things, I guess. But I made a landscape of the industry of what all kinds of sort of organizations exist in social impact space. Made an Excel sheet with all sort of different organizations. I remember my Excel sheet had like 50, 55 organizations across the country who were doing anything in social impact. And the various verticals in the social impact industry that I had landscaped at the time ranged from multilaterals who were sort of 50,000 feet from the ground in terms of how they do their work and how they impact lives, and to the other extreme of non-profits who are basically hands and feet on the ground, and who are less to do with policy or sort of national sort of things. Somewhere in between lie the private sector firms. Right? So there are firms who are doing CSR consulting things, who are mostly working with uh, the the corporates and their CSR arms. Then there are the consulting firms who are doing something in social impact, and they're sort of generalist consulting firms in social impact. So Dalberg or a Bridgespan are generalist consulting firms, and they will not choose they will not necessarily narrowly choose their clients, right? So they'll work with sometimes government, sometimes multilateral, sometimes non-profits. So they work with all sorts of organizations. So they're generalist consulting firms in social impact. Of course, a niche category within this consulting setup is the governance consulting that I do right now at Samagra. Uh, and then there are also other very niche sort of consulting firms. There was a whole other vertical of impact investing. Right? The Venn diagram where the two circles of finance and social impact meet. That actually was a natural sort of next would have been a natural next thing to do, because I had spent some time in finance. I had an interest in social impact. Impact finance would have made sense. So I actually explored a lot on that front also at the time. uh, and then there are sort of the the large non-profits who also uh, do some bit of advocacy and then some bit of on ground work, right? So there are 5 6 broad verticals within the social impact space, and I was actually keen on working on in any of them, to be honest. At the time, I wanted to get some foot in the door to understand social impact in sort of from the private sector. But my but my keenness was to do something in consulting or something in finance. So I was less keen to do something in non-profits, quite less keen to do something in multilaterals, because generally from what I had heard and so forth, it is a different kind of role. So I wanted something which was more hands-on, where I could see the impact happening, and so forth. And the speed of things was fast enough. All of these things, at least from my perspective at the time, were missing from the multilateral world. That was it was a fancy job on the CV, but did not necessarily excite me. Uh, and so I started actually. So what I did was actually very tedious. So I'd made a list of those 50 odd organizations. I'd mapped out their founders, what they do, where they do it, since when they have been in business, and so forth. And then I started meeting people one by one. So basically, I must have met like some 20, 30 folks, founders, senior executives, general employees in all of these firms. So met a lot of people just to get an idea. And this is all while I'm still in the job, right? So I'm still in my finance job, and I'm doing all this uh, just so that I can get some idea of the social impact space. Thankfully, now the space is slightly more well defined. When I was doing this was 2016, so 6 years ago. 6 years ago, actually, it's not a lot of time, but the social impact space has actually evolved a lot, where it has become more structured. It is easy to now find firms on LinkedIn, and so forth. So at the time, there was sort of hardly any firms, except for the big names. And so by pure serendipity, I ended up meeting a friend of a friend who recommended. Sort of, I also look at Samagra. Samagra was a very, very small organization, hardly a dozen people, I think, 10, 11 people at the time. I could not find a website online of Samagra. And so I had no idea what they did, but it was just one of the 50 odd firms that I had sort of figured existed in the space. And so I was actually having a conversation across multiple firms. I had a few offers from smaller firms uh, by the starting of 2017, and then I happened to sort of come across Samagra. Ended up cold emailing them. I think today, if you cold email the founder of Samagra, he may not be able to reply. But it's now a relatively bigger firm. But if you put a message on LinkedIn or DM somebody on LinkedIn, somebody will definitely reply to you, right? So I actually end up replying to a lot of people who DM me on LinkedIn. At the time, sort of people didn't have a lot of LinkedIn presence, and so I ended up cold emailing one of the founders of Samagra. He replied a month later. Uh, and during that month, of course, I had met a lot of other folks also. So he replied, he said, "Why don't you walk in, and then we can have a chat." That chat ended up sort of running into 3 4 hours, where uh, then they sort of basically took all the case interview rounds there and then. I wasn't very prepared because I had no idea that there was going to be a case interview and so forth. But uh, thankfully, it sort of happened well, and I was given the offer on that same day, basically. And so then I took a day to think on it, and purely because of two reasons, I think I took that job. One, I had a very good connect with both the founders in that first meeting, and again, connect was based on their intent to create something at scale, to create impact at scale. And the second, they were trying to do this professionally. So it was not just passion fueling sort of this approach. There was also a lot of professional and credibility and metal that they wanted to sort of put in. and they wanted to create impact in a more structured, in a more professional manner. Uh, as opposed to, I think, a lot of the non-profits, or in fact also a lot of the multilaterals who are more passionate than they are skilled, right? And I figured that this was a place where both passion and skill sets are equally sort of important, and that really clicked with me. And the second was that they were really sort of ambitious in their goals. uh, Very ambitious. There's like hardly 10 people, right, in the firm. Very ambitious in what they were trying to do, in sort of really contributing to nation building, not just from one school at a time, but sort of lakhs of children, uh, lakhs of farmers, lakhs of the ambition was sort of very inspiring. And so just by sheer sort of connect, and the sort of connect with the founders, connect with the vision of that they had for the firm, uh, I took a very radical call and basically resigned from my firm and decided to join. Took a pay cut, took a position cut. Uh, uh, my family was obviously very concerned for what I was trying to do, because it had taken me a lot of time, a lot of struggle to sort of get a decent job. Uh, and it had also taken me some time to get my confidence back, to grow some skill sets, right? It had taken a while. Of course, in school, you always think you're so great, but then when you don't get results, then you losing trust in that statement, right? So it had taken a while to sort of realize that I was not so bad. And then again, I was taking a plunge into something new, where I had to again sort of I had to learn new skill sets, I had to learn about the domain, I had to again establish myself in the firm, in my career and so forth. So uh, I basically did it purely basis a gut feeling of, one, getting back to why I wanted to do any job, the three circles in my Venn diagram, and two, really, I think, wanted to I really sort of bought into the vision of creating impact at scale, that at least Samagra was, uh, had at the time, still has. And so basically ended up in Samagra. uh, so I'll stop here again. उसके बाद भी there's been a journey within Samagra, but maybe you can take some questions, a lot of questions.
Yes, yes, let's do that. Uh, Shahul wants to know how is life in social impact and also what skills are required to get into social impact. And
Okay.
okay, do you want to take them one by one?
Uh, is, I can answer this question. I see some other questions also on skills, so I can actually answer this skill question first.
All right. Yeah,
So,
Sarvesh wants to know that he also wants to know that there's a great emphasis on data-driven solutions, he says. Is there a scope for analytics in the social impact industry? And if yes, what are the skill requirements?
hmm, okay, yeah. So, the answer to this question actually depends on which vertical in the impact space are you trying to work in. So, as I was saying, if the idea is to work in a multilateral, uh, or a corporate CSR arm, or a gender, or sort of a smaller non-profit, or even a larger non-profit, then the major skill set is actually twofold. The hard skills required are sort of project management, basic Excel, basic presentation making, and so forth. And then you would also need some domain knowledge of that, sort of non-profit or multilateral, right? So if multilateral is into health, then they would prefer people who have had some experience in health, and over and above have a decent CV so that they can shortlist an interview. On a day-to-day basis, you might just need product management and basic sort of hard skills. If you want to get into finance, of course, I would actually very strongly say that financial skills will be more important than the social impact bent, uh, because you can you can get domain knowledge of social impact later, but it is probably difficult to get finance knowledge later, right? So if you're trying to establish yourself, or get in a foot in the door in the finance field, I would highly recommend you doing some courses on finance, so corporate finance, uh, Excel modeling, DCF modeling, understanding terminologies, understanding various parts of uh, sort of the the financial statements. So what is a balance sheet? What are components come in cash flow statement and so forth. So some basics of corporate finance, some basics of Excel modeling. All of this I would highly recommend that you do from maybe a Coursera or some place, and get yourself equipped with finance basics, and then applying to a impact investing firm makes sense, because you would have some experience of having given the UPSC. So of course you have a demonstrated bent towards social impact because of your UPSC experience, and you also have a skill set which can give you, if not an associate role, but it can maybe give you an internship in the firm, right? So on the impact investing side, I would say those things important. On the impact consulting side, again, the same rule applies, where a hard consulting skill set will be important. In consulting, the skill set generally is about solving cases, right? So you can look up case prep online. A lot of resources on doing case prep, and the case prep basically requires you to, when you're given a vague problem statement, say you're told uh, how. Hmm, how do you solve for mental health uh, in a uh, in a corporate setup? They say that's the problem statement. The other problem statement could be, okay, how do you improve livelihood options for the horticulture industry? So there are vague problem statements, right? There are big problem statements. Some you will find it difficult to find a starting point. कि शुरू कैसे करें हम? Right? So the case method will help you sort of solve for such vague problem statements. ऐसे ही problem statements will come to you in interviews of consulting firms. Uh, of course, you can start from the basics, and the basics are cases around guesstimates. How many footballs can you fill inside an aircraft kind of questions? Those are guesstimate questions. And you can get into sort of basic uh, profit or revenue increase questions, which say, okay, if you are selling toothpaste, how do you improve profitability of toothpaste in a specific market? And so there are specific ways of breaking down these problems. Okay, so even though the questions seem difficult, they seem sort of ambiguous, there are very specific ways of solving for these questions when you actually start case prep. So doing some case prep is, I would highly recommend that if you want to get into consulting, any impact consulting firm. Some firms will be more hard on the cases than others. Samagra, for instance, I will say that uh, will want you to be good at case consulting. Of course, it will be probably 30-40% of the interview. 30-40% will be other softer skills that you can portray, which would be intercommunication skills, being able to sort of articulate what you're thinking, being able to take feedback during the interview and then incorporating it in your solution, which is more of a listening ability and so on, which is also a reflection of can you think on your feet and so other things. And I think the other third, so one third will be case prep, one third will be other softer part of things, and the last one third will be your demonstrated keenness to do something in social impact, right? So because all of you have done some UPSC prep, you've spent considerable time sort of sitting for these exams, preparing for these exams, have gone through that grueling emotional journey of preparing, not getting selected or getting selected, and so forth. The last one third, I think, is already a good tick, and it is important for you to reflect on that experience and really take out what are the 2-3 things that you've really learned. A common question, in fact, I tend to ask is, ठीक है तुमने यूपीएससी दे दिया, great. What one thing did you learn that you think you will not remember, not forget for the rest of your life? And so it can't be 10 things. It can definitely not be knowledge. Who cares about what Greeks were doing, right? But there has to be something which you learned on the softer side, on the resilience side, on sort of how to build back confidence, how to take ownership of things, how to keep doing things even though the result is very far away. And there are a lot of sort of transferable skills. We call them transferable skills. So a lot of transferable softer skills that you learn, which are very very important in any professional journey, irrespective of the kind of role it is. And so I would highly recommend you reflecting on that experience that you've had on UPSC and articulating it beforehand, so that when this question is asked, you're not fumbling, and you come across as a person who's really given it your all and also reflected back. uh, तो सिर्फ आंखें बंद करके प्रिपेयर नहीं करना है, आप प्रिपेयर कर लिया, अब आपको सोचना है कि अब हुआ क्या, so that you can do better, right? And especially UPSC prep people, I think the last one third, you should be able to really tick mark quickly. On the softer skills, again, I think uh, a lot of it comes from your undergrad, your schooling, all of those experiences. But I'm assuming you can also do well here through preparation, through mock interviews, through other things, through just general confidence. The first one third is where you might need prep. And so what I want you to take away from this is कि यार, just because you are into UPSC, just because you really want to do something in social impact, does not mean people will take you. You have to have a skill set. Even and today the competition for associate positions is very very high, right? So the good part is you're already sort of two-thirds there, but the one third part of hard preparation on case studies, case interviews, that you should definitely do. There are a lot of actually forums where you can practice with external folks on just solving case prep things. We tend to share a lot of things on our LinkedIn page, on Samagra's LinkedIn page, on the kind of case studies that we ask, the kind of solutions that we expect. And so there are a lot of posts on case prep that you can see on our LinkedIn page. And also all the other firms must have something on their sort of websites where they showcase sort of some highlight impact cases that they solved for in the past. So would highly recommend that you do that. Do the one third part, which will be new prep for you, and the other two thirds part will be more reflections, more get making it articulate for the interviewer.
I think
So
Aditya, what you
yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
Yes, I was saying that what you just said, I think that sort of feeds into Sarvesh's other question about how to justify 3 years of UPSC break. That one thing that they have
I
learned from.
Yeah, I wrote in my CV about आजकल सभी लोग लिखते हैं. At the time, I wrote about being the top 0.03% of people who have given interviews and so forth. Nobody cares, I think. Nobody cares if I was in top 1% or not. What people care about is the perseverance of doing anything. I think what I really value, and in my own reflections of my journey, what I really have valued is the idea of pursuing one thing really, really well. Success or not is different. And so, even to those people who have not done UPSC, I often ask a question which is कि यार कोई एक चीज बताओ जो बहुत ही passionately करी हो. It could be a hobby, it could be academics, anything. One thing in academics, it could be something outside of your academics. It could be something at work. It could be uh, a lot of people sort of volunteer, a lot of people paint, a lot of people have some music interests. कोई एक चीज जो बहुत साल से करी है. And what I'm trying to get to is not कि वो एक चीज मैं कोई लिखूंगा. What I'm trying to get to is यार, if you really pursue something for long, when you give it all, there are a lot of learnings that come from that experience. And so then my next obvious question is, what did you learn from that experience? And so if the person has really reflected on it, they would have absorbed a lot of the learnings which are important for a high-paced performance setup like a Samagra. Uh, if you have not reflected, I will highly urge you to reflect. Uh, तो generally यार मतलब हाँ मतलब I would say कि writing in your CV about your experience as of UPSC will not get counted negatively, and will definitely not be looked at as a waste of time, as somebody has said in the comments. Uh, if you can extract out those two, three, four important things that you have learned, and you can articulate them in the interview, yeah, that goes a long way. Uh, you should also you should also have a good justification of why you spent 7 years. uh, if they were thoughtfully spent 7 years, if there were sort of reasons that are understandable for those 7 years, then it sort of, I don't think it will go against you. But if you just kept on going without sort of realizing कि अब करना क्या है, and you thought यही एक option है, then it might become difficult for the other person to really understand कि 7 साल क्यों लगा दिया. uh, right? So these are some of the questions I think you have to prepare for when it comes to the sort of interview process. But before the interview, is a case wise ये सब करना ही होगा. So without, I think, fretting over a lot the small questions that might get asked in the interview, I would highly recommend that you prep on the hard skills, and that will at least take you to the interview. Otherwise वो नहीं पहुंचोगे तो फिर क्या फायदा है fretting over small questions for the interview.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think we're done with the questions. I don't think we have any other questions. Aditya, I had a couple of questions for you. One was, what was the emotional aspect of coming out of UPSC like for you? Was it hard? Did you have mental health problems at that time? Because many of us have struggled with those or are currently struggling with those. Maybe some of our viewers right now struggling with some mental issues. Like, it took you a long time to realize that, oh, I'm not that bad. Because in school you thought you're great, and then you had this dip where you felt like you're nothing, and then it took you a while to realize you're not that bad, quoting you in your words.
Yeah.
So did you also have other related mental health issues related to low self-esteem, maybe depression?
Yeah. Yeah. The short answer is yes. But the longest answer, I would start by saying I did not know it was called mental health. So these are sort of terms that I've gotten to know now, and I fully relate to sort of the things that get discussed now, because at least there's a vocabulary to now how of being able to speak of that experience in a common vocabulary, right? So that's helpful. So if I use that vocabulary, I feel that I definitely had mental health issues. Uh, the symptoms of that, of having mental health issues, I think, related to uh, my getting irritated on a few things, or my me not having sort of enough distraction free time when I sort of sat down to study. uh, I sat down to study. I think my second attempt was the best attempt that I gave, uh, just in terms of inputs. And I remember sort of sitting, having a schedule that did not change at all, which started from sort of waking up early in the morning, somewhere around 6:30, reading the newspaper, uh, revising my notes, having a bath, getting ready, having breakfast, running to my coaching class, coming back, having half a lunch with sort of half an hour of TV, and then sitting for 6 hours, then taking a break, talking to my then girlfriend, then sitting for dinner, and then sitting post dinner. It was exactly the same, minute by minute, every day, for months together. And that was, I think, the best time of my prep phase, because I had zero mental health issues. I was fully in my zone, as we call it. uh, I was fully in control of my time. I did not get ill. uh, all of the things sort of would just tick mark, picture perfect sort of prep time. uh, in my third attempt, I think, because a lot of things were going on in my mind, uh, both from a confidence perspective, from a will I get through perspective, uh, that schedule was all sort of not. I was not in that zone, right? So symptoms were that my schedule was not as fixed. I did not feel as on top of my calendar as I did earlier. I did not have distraction-free 6 hours of study in the evenings as I did earlier. There were times I sort of just open my phone, or I'm getting on calls, or I'm sort of googling whatever I read in the paper in the morning, and so, or I'm following trends. कि यार अरे इसका क्या हो गया? Somebody is telling me कोई discount लगा है. I'm also looking at discounts. I have no intention to buy anything, like, right? But these are just symptoms of you getting distracted, uh, uh, when you're sort of really not in your zone. And so वो चीज़ें ज़्यादा थी. I think on the personal side, of course, अलग चीज़ें थी, where the anxiety, I don't think I had visible anxiety, but I could feel that I was not as comfortable, I was not as calm. I'm generally a very calm person as a sort of personality type, and so all those things were there. I can share two things that really helped, and again, I did those things serendipitously at the time, accidentally. Uh, the intentionality of solving for mental health was, I think, not there, because I didn't realize I had mental health issues. I realized it's part of the journey of preparation. But two things helped. One, being in touch with people who were in the same zone as me. So being in touch with fellow sort of aspirants, uh, and here I would say you should select the people you are with very carefully. Any aspirant, I think, is not not a good idea, because uh, there are so many people, over 12-15 lakh people who give the exam, at least fill the form for the exam. I think hardly 2 or 3 lakh people are very serious about the exam. And so picking out those very serious people who are in the right phase of their life, who are in the right zone of preparation, who are also optimistic, and who can sort of help you be an optimist in that time, I think choosing those kind of people really helped. uh, and I had a good bunch of friends that I was able to at least talk to frequently. And the second, I think, was just being in a slightly more stable sort of personal space. uh, so good support from home, good support from uh, your girlfriend or boyfriend or your partner, generally sort of trying to lead a very very minimalistic lifestyle, where variations on the financial front or other fronts will not sort of hamper your mental health if you have a very sort of minimalistic lifestyle. So these two things of being comfortable in personal space and having some people who share your experience, and you can lift your sort of optimism from time to time. I think both things really helped. Did not help enough to get through the exam, but helped on the mental health front, I think.
But I think you found other things to do, and who's to say, perhaps better things to do. No, I don't know if you would
No,
say yes to
absolutely.
that. Yes?
Absolutely.
Okay, why do you say
I,
yes to that? I'm
yeah.
curious.
No, I think everything is a function of opportunity cost. And so within finance, we we keep on thinking about returns, we keep on thinking about risk. But when it comes to sort of evaluating our life, or when we look at other people's lives, when people share about their lives, we tend to focus on the returns, right? We never think about the risks, or what went into the game, right? So if I had become an IS officer at sort of 30 years of age, and I was able to do something in subsequent 30 years, of course there are a lot of achievement that I would have been able to show. But that is not the case, right? What has happened is I sort of shifted away from that journey before I turned 25, and uske baad se I've had a journey of my own. Now, who is to say that those 7 years of not uh, doing something else and keeping up with the UPSC prep? So at 30 years of age, am I happy when I've become an IS officer? I've probably wasted 8 years of my life, as somebody is writing. Uh, I have probably not learned as many things as I could. All right. So there's an opportunity cost. And so why I'm happy about sort of what I'm doing today is because there is I've basically minimized the opportunity cost. I gave it all for a few years and then I quit. And it was one of the hardest decisions I ever made, because it kept lingering on in my head. What if sort of every year when you see the results and UPSC results come, it's a normal sort of reaction to feel कि शायद नाम आ गया हो, मैंने एग्जाम भी नहीं दिया है उस साल, right? But you just want your name there because you were dreaming about it for so many years, right? And those moments of regret and reflection keep coming to you, uh, but they're just momentary sort of things, right? And in the macro sense of things, you were able to sort of get the better of the opportunity cost. You were able to utilize time, you were able to work on your mental health, you were able to contribute positively, which was the sort of objective in the first place, right? That I'm able to contribute something to the society. I'm able to impact people who are slightly sort of more than my immediate family and myself. And so when I'm able to achieve those objectives, when I'm able to say that okay, I'm contributing positively and I'm adding value, it's a very good feeling. uh, the idea, of course, in any case, was not to just become an IAS officer. That was never the goal. The goal was to create impact. And as I said, my Venn diagram met at an IAS officer's role as the best role to do that. ठीक है, ये रोल नहीं कोई और सही. So I had not stopped at saying कि IAS officer बनना, that is the goal. And so that was also it was not the driving factor also. To be honest, had I become an revenue service or some railway traffic or railway personnel service officer, I wouldn't have been happy at all, I think. Because they are sort of office jobs. Of course, they contribute a lot to the country, and they have their own share of value addition. But in when I was imagining what I want to do, those roles were not what I was imagining. And so, had I gotten those roles, I probably wouldn't have stuck around. I don't know. Probably would have stuck around for the government job, for the security, for all those things. But I am less sure if I would have stuck around for the impact or the excitement of the job. And so when I think about all those things, I feel yeah, ठीक है. I took a call. I took the when I took that call, I took on the risks that were associated. I also took on the returns that I could get out of it. And basis the risks that I've taken, I think I've had decent returns. To be very very sort of objective about it. And the returns are far more on the satisfaction side कि यार ठीक है, अभी भी I'm still associated with sort of impact. I'm able to contribute something in my own small way. हम ये नहीं कह रहे हैं कि हम देश बदल रहे हैं अकेले होकर, but ठीक है, I have a small role to play and I'm happy that I have a small role to play. So yeah, इसलिए answer is yes.
Thank you for the long answer as well, Aditya. I have one last question for you. We haven't spoken about your MBA. When did that come into the picture? You did an MBA at Oxford Science School of
Yeah,
Business.
yeah.
When did you start thinking about doing an MBA, and what propelled you, and what do you think helped you get through? The third part of that question is, how did you justify your gap years, if at all you needed to?
Yeah, lot of questions there.
I
Uh,
can break it down one by one if you don't
no,
mind.
but I'll take them. When did I start thinking about an MBA? I think I did not start until I'd spent a good number of years within Samagra, and I had clarity on what I wanted to do post an MBA. So जब तक वो clarity नहीं था, I actually did not want to do an MBA. I think if you want to do an MBA in India, what I figured was it is it is best to do it within the first couple of years of your professional journey, because most of the IIMs and ISBs will want you to be very young when you get out, because most of the recruiters want young associates in their firm so that they can grow and nurture them within the firm. Once you have certain number of years of experience, I think exploring what you will do post your MBA and using the MBA as an exploration zone, uh, it makes more sense to do it from outside of India, because there you have a cohort which is like you. Within India, I think there's a lot of uh, I don't know, stressful competition on sort of getting a job while you're at the end, right? So the exploration part gets missed, because you'll end up running with everybody else in preparing for interviews, getting job offers, and so forth. And so even in a school like ISB, I think, which is a great school, I feel the pressure to get a job starts more quickly than you expect. So it's like a 10-11 month journey. You sort of, even if you delayed uh, by some time, you'll sort of start getting into jobs maybe latest by 6 months, if not earlier, right? So the 4 or 5 months you get in the beginning are not good enough to get an exploratory sort of idea about all the things that are possible post in MBA. And so you have to be quite sure क्या करना है. So I did not think about an MBA until I was sure कि क्या करूँगा उसके बाद. How will I use it? What will I use it for? What is a good role that I want post in MBA? वो सब सोच लिया था, तब उसके बाद सोचा कि चलो करते हैं. Because I thought a lot about what I want to do post the MBA. I also then worked backwards from it and figured कहाँ apply करें. So I wanted a good university which was sort of one of the best in the world. I wanted something that would give me a network which will be relevant, because I wanted to stay in the social impact space. I wanted to stay in the consulting space. Uh, I wanted to keep an option of finance as sort of the other thing. So impact consulting, impact finance as two big themes were sort of there in my mind of post MBA things, and uh, I wanted a network which would be sort of good at these things. And of course, I want, as a theme area, I wanted to go to a place where social impact was talked about. It was sort of a core of what the school did. ये सब सारे filter लगा, and also I didn't want to spend 2 years, because again there was an opportunity cost for 2 years. I was sort of supporting the family, and a lot of things were on my mind, and so I didn't want to spend 2 years. There was added cost to it, uh, and I felt that I was ready to and sort of do it in a year. Uh, and so, basis all these filters, only one school came out of the whole filtering process, and I basically ended up applying only to Oxford, because that was the only school that passed all these 3 4 criteria. And so I applied, I got through, and so uh, what helped was just this. I was actually, I think I'm very grateful that I got through. नहीं होता तो फिर अजीब हो जाता. Then I would have had to start the journey again of diagnosing कहाँ जाना है, because it was a very very long journey of me trying to figure out exactly क्या करना है and then कहाँ से करना है. And so because I shortlisted only one school, sort of it became easy to really focus all my energies on getting into that one school. Now, getting in requires, I think, three things. It requires a GMAT score, of course. It requires some clarity on what you want to do, and then the third thing, it requires you articulating that clarity into those 500 words or whatever you get in the application, right? And all three, I think, are distinct things to do. The thinking should not be confused with the writing, and the GMAT should not be confused with the thinking. So all of these things are very distinct things, and so I took them also very as distinct things. GMAT, thankfully, I'd done. Uh, in my finance job, there was a there was a wave of everybody giving GMAT, and so I had ridden that wave. सब लोग प्रेप कर रहे थे, मैंने भी एक महीना प्रेप करके दे दिया था, तो आई हैड अ डिसेंट स्कोर फ्रॉम माय फाइनेंस डेज. तो वो जीमेट स्कोर चल रहा था, 5 साल के लिए वैलिड होता है. So but actually I didn't have to give GMAT again. The thinking phase I spent a lot of time, uh, more than required, I think. But the thing with these things also is कि यार आप ऐसा नहीं है कि आप बैठ के सोचते हो और सब कुछ तभी याद आता है. You have gone through a journey in your professional sort of career where you've really reflected and thought of these things for years. What is required is that you spend a few months really thinking hard on why, what, when, how, all those aspects of your journey so far and what you want to do ahead. And then close down on sort of who you are. Question, बहुत ही common question होता है कि यार, who is Aditya and what does he want to do in Oxford? And there will be some variation of this in the application. इससे ज़्यादा कुछ बाहर नहीं होता है. It's a lot about your own reflection of who you are, what are your strengths, what are you really wanting to get out of this school, and how do you think with all of this combined you'll be able to create an impact later. So that's more time. That's it, right? इतना ही आपको सोचना है, and it took me a few months to really think about these things and capture them at least in some format. And then when I started filling out the application, there were specific questions that I had to answer. And to be honest, it was mostly a copy pasting of a lot of these things only that I put into those answers. Right? ठीक है, they ask specific questions about entrepreneurship or something. ठीक है, वो इसी का ही कुछ mix and match होता है. And so the GMAT, the thinking, the writing, all three things, I think were required. On the writing part, I must have, and Samagra is a very sort of busy job. So there wasn't a lot of time that I got, at least. So it was basically a few weekends that I spent writing those applications. I would have loved to actually spend more time. Uh, but कुछ वीकेंड लगाए थे, कुछ लोगों की हेल्प ली थी, एंड sort of who had gotten through कि यार अब देख लो. I didn't want to do a consulting sort of setup for the applications, so I took help from friends and other folks. They were gracious enough to give feedback. तो feedback करके basically after some iterations I had submitted the application. So that was sort of the journey. Uh, I came back because so अब ये था कि जो मुझे MBA की बात करना था, a lot of the things I was actually doing at Samagra. So I did not expect, or to be honest, require a lot of thinking on कि अच्छा कुछ इतना क्या नया करना है MBA के बाद. A lot of things I was already doing. It was more about growing into that role, doing a lot more things, more aspirational, more ambitious things. And so क्योंकि वो सब लग रहा था मुझे समग्र में पॉसिबल है, एक्चुअली टुक अ कॉल टू कम बैक. एंड वो कॉल काफ़ी पहले ले लिया था. डिस्कस्ड विद सॉर्ट ऑफ द ऑर्गेनाइजेशन ऑफ हाउ, ऐसे कुछ स्ट्रक्चर्ड प्रोग्राम था नहीं कि वापस आओ तो क्या होता है. एंड सो डिस्कस्ड एट लेंथ कि अब क्या कर सकते हैं, हाउ कैन वी सॉर्ट, वाज able to come up with some plan of what I'll do when I come back and so forth. And so अभी तक वो plan चल रहा है. Have been able to, I think, grow well in the firm. Uh,
How many years
have
has it been since you came back?
Since I came back, 2 years since I came back. But I spent total of 5 years. Uh, मई में 5 साल हो गए मुझे समझ.
Okay. And last part of that question was, did they ask you, did you have to justify at any point your 3-year preparation gap? How did you do that?
So on my CV there's a 2 year gap, and उसके बाद internship का उसमें आता है CV में. I actually really boasted about that experience, to be honest. It was one of the things that I counted as one of the achievements that I had in my life, being able to spend those 3 years getting a lot of knowledge, getting a lot of emotional maturity and strength, and then the thing that I was saying in the beginning, really culling out what transferable skills that experience gave me. And so at no point in the process did I ever try to hide that time, or even try to sort of lowball that time. I have always played it up. And जैसे मैं काफ़ी लोगों को मैं बोलता हूँ फ्रंट फुट पे ही खेला है. आई हैव प्लेड ऑन द फ्रंट फुट कि यार एकदम सॉलिड एक्सपीरियंस था. इट हैज रियली टॉट मी अ लॉट ऑफ थिंग्स दैट आई डू राइट नाउ. It has given me that sort of clarity of what I want to do in with my life. uh, and वो इतना सब कुछ, people take decades to get that sort of realization. And so that was, I think, a 2 year crash course into really knowing myself. uh, that's what I did. And so I played it up in my application. I really played it up in my interview also. Not to play it up as a sort of badge without examples, right? So there were a lot of small nuances that I was able to bring out in my application कि यार ऐसा हुआ, ये एक इंस्टेंस बताता हूँ कि ऐसा हुआ. This is how exactly वो जो सीखा था I'm utilizing in my finance job, I'm now using in my social impact job. And so a lot of those things actually I brought out. At no point again matlab, did I feel it was a break. And it is a very common thing outside of India. Almost everybody who applies has a break. Some people have a break for sort of traveling the world. Some people just have a break for chilling. Some people will want to work on a farm. They'll go to their sort of family business to try something out. So almost everybody will have some or the other break, but nobody will call it a break. They will call it a journey, an experience, or something. And so I think as an Indian applicant, we tend to see only our sort of pool of people, and their terminology of what we are doing is basically a break on the CV. I would say that forget this vocabulary. Nobody outside of India cares कि तुम्हारे CV में कितना gap है, because ultimately you're going to have a 40-year career. एक दो साल nobody cares about. Even 5 years, I think nobody cares about. If you're able to really tell what you did and what you learned, and so forth. बिल्कुल भी फर्क नहीं पड़ता है. एज एन एग्जांपल बताता हूँ, तो इन माय फाइनेंस जॉब, वन ऑफ द सीनियर sort of advisors in the firm was a sort of finance expert in a few domains. उसका qualification से he was PhD in music. So he had spent some 8 years after undergrad studying music, doing a doctorate in it, becoming a very specialized person studying music, and then he transitioned into finance. And then we become a leader in finance. अब उसके सीवी पे अगर देखो, रेलेवेंट वर्क एक्स देखो, तो यार देयर इज अ 8 year gap. There is doing something which is totally unrelated, wouldn't sort of naturally help his job. But if you're able to sort of cull out the transferable skills, the sort of experiences, other things that he would have learned in that journey, I'm sure it helps in sort of in the finance job as well. Right? So बहुत ही common है of people sort of doing very very different things or not doing anything for that matter. For a few years, it's absolutely fine. Nobody cares. Uh, Unless we get defensive, nobody will ask us. Basically, that's the crux of it.
Great. Thank you, Aditya. It was an excellent session. I learned a lot myself, especially that bit about playing on the front foot always. I loved that play that you used there. And I'll
Yeah.
use that to tell all the other ex aspirants who ask me now, what do they do about those 3 years? So maybe just painting it differently, even in your own head, will help your mental health, I suppose, and
Yeah,
feel
yeah,
better.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Most of it is in the head. हम बस सोचते रहते हैं. It is solvable through just the right use of vocabulary, I think. It is not a break, it is a learning journey. It is we don't have to be defensive front foot पे खेलना है. Just changing the vocabulary, I think, changes the game. Uh, cool. There's a question on salary. Uh, and
Can
what are
you
the,
answer that?
yeah,
It's
yeah, I can
okay.
ask.
Okay, great.
Uh, there, we don't actually publish salaries, but what I would say is कि Samagra consultants are mostly post MBA folks. So an example is when we go to an ISB for campus hiring. So an ISB sort of MBA who would already have say 2 to 4 years of work ex will typically get a consulting sort of role. Sometimes we'll also get a senior associate role, but a consultant position, and the compensation will be very comparative to sort of the top tier consulting firms in the corporate sector. We pay more than Dalberg. You can imagine something around a 20 to a 30 lakh bracket, and बीच में ही रहेगा उसमें depending on your experience and your sort of performance in the interview. Uh, this is the best that anybody will pay in the impact space. Of course, because we are a consulting firm, we are competing for talent with other consulting firms, and so therefore the salary is very competitive. When it comes to growth, I would say that growth is 100% faster than any other sort of consulting firm. We have a 6 month appraisal cycle where you can grow every 6 months within the firm. A typical cycle of growth is a year, so you can grow in responsibilities and position every year, ideally. And if you don't grow sort of so fast, everybody, I think, growing 18 months is the norm. uh, and the top performers can grow every year. The super top performers can grow every 6 months. And so that's generally the cycle of things, which basically means that if you join post an MBA into the firm, you can become partner in the firm in 5 6 years, which is one of the fastest that you can have as any journey in a consulting firm. If you join as uh, an undergrad can of course just maybe add three years to it. Right? So from undergrad without an MBA, and we don't necessarily want people to do an MBA to become partners in the firm or to have management sort of roles. And so an undergrad joining Samagra, doing really well and sticking around, can become partner in say 7 to 9 years. Uh, so which basically means that if you're a 21-year-old, 22-year-old joining the firm, you can be partner by the time you're 30, 31. Uh, and this is an extraordinary role. As a partner, you're sort of managing a lot of people, a lot of responsibility. The money, of course, is beyond your imagination when you're 21. And so all of those things are taken care of. The only thing we require is that you're constantly learning and growing on the job, because it's a tough job. I wouldn't say it's an easy job to do, because it combines the complexity of being in consulting, which in any case is fast paced and requires sort of constantly to be at it, but it also adds the complexity of working with the government, which of course has its own complexities of dealing with the bureaucracy, the the sort of large scale we work at means that a lot of things can go wrong, and so just being able to manage all of those things and so forth, all of those things of course make the job tough. But I think the good part is once you come in, it's a lot of focus on professional growth, because people are the only assets we have. That's how we increase our balance sheet, by growing people, both in numbers and once they're inside, by really improving their quality. And so it absolutely is in everybody's favor that everybody who comes to the firm becomes a partner in the firm. And so a lot of focus is on professional development and growth of everybody in the firm. uh, and I actually tell the sort of new joinees that you should always contact your manager. And if of course your manager's job is to sort of do PD, we call them coaching one-on-ones. Your manager's job is to do your coaching and to help you grow, not just because it is helpful to you, but actually we have tied financial incentives to how well you grow your team, right? So there's all the incentives in the firm to grow everybody who joins, right? Not just from a people perspective, but also financial incentives are aligned. The better your team grows, the better you grow. And so it is not a versus B game here, that only if A grows, B can't grow. We have not built such structures, right? So, in an ideal setup, all the people in Samagra can get promoted that same year. So nobody is competing for growth as such internally, and so that actually makes the culture better, the profession development, sort of incentivization better, and so forth. So this is sort of the longish answer on what are the growth prospects.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Aditya. If you have any closing comments for us today, for the ex aspirants or the aspirants or just the viewers here today, you've seen some of the questions. Anything you want to say before you leave?
Uh, नहीं यार, I think भाई I'll say the thing कि front foot पे खेलना है. Don't at all take this experience as an experience which wasted your time or sort of did not make you learn anything. Because as when we talk to our friends, there are so many 90% of things nobody has any idea about, right? So you now know so much that any newspaper makes sense to you, all Twitter threads make sense to you, all sorts of jobs make sense to you. And because all of this is true, there is no reason to feel that you wasted time or anything. I think once I wouldn't say that we should be uh, quickly jumping on to the conclusion of not pursuing the UPSC, because there's obviously a value to that. But once you decide कि अब नहीं करना है, you should really play on the front foot and say कि यार अब we will be very good employees, we will be very good additions to any firm that takes us. Of course preparation is required to get into those firms, but playing on the front foot will really change the game, I think, because if you are confident you will appear confident, and you will also do well in all the processes, because वहाँ पर confidence will help. uh, so get out of that defensive bubble of कि एग्जाम नहीं निकला, जो हो गया वो हो गया. Now you are a solid candidate in any firm, uh, in any startup. In fact, the only requirement in any startup today is that person should be able to work hard enough. और कुछ नहीं चाहिए होता है. All startups are sort of trying to get people who are solid, who will give it their all. And if you are that person, every startup will want you, right? So कोई भी ऐसा स्टार्टअप नहीं देखा मैंने जो रिजेक्ट करता है लोगों को बिकॉज उनको फाइनेंस का 19-20 नहीं पता था. People get rejected because they have not shown commitment, or they have not shown willingness to really give it all. But because you've gone through that journey, I'm sure you have that in you to give it all when whatever you pick up. You absolutely play on the front foot. I think it will be you'll add value, and people will be happy to have you. ये तुम सोच के चलो, हो जाएगा. I think.
Okay, thank you so much, Aditya. Thank you for your time. It was lovely speaking with you again. Hope to have you here again sometime soon for a Zoom session where people can ask you their questions directly.
Yep.
Okay, bye bye.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Bye and all the best.
Thank you.